We're actually going to tape a podcast here. Jim's going to sit with a select group of contractors from around the country and Canada, and Dennis Doran is going to moderate it. But for those of you, almost everyone here knows Dennis Doran. He's been speaking at these events he's been speaking at these events and for you locally for many years. He served the construction industry overall for over 30 years as a contractor, consultant, strategic trainer and facilitator, development coach, and public speaker. Dennis has launched and is hosting the Soft as Steel podcast, which we are recording here today with a panel. You will be able to download and listen to this podcast by visiting his site and finding the link at DennisDuranSpeaking.com. Please now welcome Dennis, our General President, and our contractor panel. Thank you.
When you hear the phrase, soft as steel, what do you think of? While the word steel might conjure up images such as massive high-rise buildings, where does the soft part come in, and what exactly does this mean in our work and in our lives? Welcome to the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Doran, featuring engaging conversations with a wide range of industry leaders around soft skills, how we practice love, inclusion, social justice, and compassionate leadership that's everlasting in the workplace. And now, here's Dennis Doran.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invitation to bring the Soft as Steel podcast to the FIF. This is a vitally important meeting of contractors in the union, and I think that when you hear what we're talking about, you understand that thematically, we're falling very much in line with the future vision that the General President of the IUPAT has. I'd like to say that what we're going to do for the next roughly 60 to 90 minutes is pivot to people. We're going to talk about things that relate to the people in our industry at all levels. You're going to hear the thoughts, ideas, and even the feelings of these leaders with regards to people in our industry. So let me introduce them, starting from this side, whichever that side is. I'm not good at left and right. Is Chris Bagatellis, who's the CEO of Bags, a glass and glazing contractor in California. Sitting to his immediate left is Paul Tesouris, who was mentioned this morning in Jim's comments. No further introduction is needed for this great leader. Next to Paul is Jessica Helmer, who is the sales relationship executive and partner at Alltech Decorating. And in the middle, our General President is Jim Williams. Next to Jim is Jeff Gramberg, who's the owner and CEO of PD Group, a Canadian contractor, a very large and important contractor for this union in Canada. And finally, someone you met this morning who was appropriately honored. I'd like to say with great emotion that he's a great, great friend of mine, and that is Bob Swanson, who is retired. And if you want to get a taste of more of Bob Swanson, I interviewed him on my podcast, one of my first interviews. A fantastic conversation. So let me just describe to you how this is going to transpire this morning. It is a conversation. None of these individuals were given prepared remarks to use in responding to a series of questions that I will use to kind of seed the conversation. The questions are interesting, perhaps even thought-provoking. Perhaps even challenging to reflect on. So one ask I would have of you as the audience, as you sit here and listen to this conversation, that you reflect on what your thoughts are about each of the questions as you hear what their thoughts are. I'm the guy that talks about soft skills, a part of developing individuals, which I think is vitally important to the success of all industries, and certainly for the finishing trades. So I'm going to begin with my first question. And since Chris is sitting closest to me, he gets to go with the first answer.
All right, let's go.
The question is this: how do we discover our commonality despite our differences?
So I would say that, I'll make sure I'm working here. that are, commonality. We do that through our shared life experiences, right? So all of us have similar things that we go through in life, whether that's our relationships, our issues with our boss, our taxes. I think when we can bring those shared experiences into our conversation with our peers and our partners, we create a better environment. And I would contend that there's more commonalities than we know. And things like sports teams, there's another great one. I think we all have our home team that we root for, and we can create a relationship with other people through those commonalities and shared life experiences. Then we have a better work environment and a better team. And I would say, if I were to look out here now, a perfect example would be, I'm from California, Northern California, and I'd say, go Niners. And there's a significant group, I would imagine, that would be on my team and ready to go right away, and we'd create a shared experience and some commonality.
Not this week.
Yeah, I did that intentionally, of course, because I know there's some Philly guys here.
Paul, add on. Commonality and differences.
Can you repeat the question again?
I can. I should mention appropriately at this point, at least a couple of people in the audience know this, that my number one desire in terms of a career journey was to be a game show host. So we're coming perilously close to that.
Fabulous.
Yeah. What do you think, Jessica?
Yeah, I think 150%. You would be great at that.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Could you repeat that like 5 times? Never mind. Paul, the question was this: how do we discover our commonality despite our differences?
I really believe, from experience in my own life, it's a collaboration of having time together, whether it's work-related, leisure time, whether it's in your neighborhood. I've seen incredible differences in very dissimilar background people that came to our job sites with a lot of derogatory beliefs going in. And of course, I had to put the referee jersey on. But ironically, as diverse as their backgrounds were, that exposure time of having to work together towards a common goal, they began to appreciate and understand one another. And, from their inception time of working together to the time a project was done is profound. Because we all come with pre-existing mental perspectives of who someone may be based on whatever their background is, whatever their ethnic group is. And I hate to say it, one of the best ways to discover one another is actually being in a work environment.
Well said. You're hinting at one of the things which is a barrier to achieving inclusion, which is implicit bias, which is in the dialogue more prominently now, and we're starting to recognize that it is a problem. It's a problem that's not going to go away with soft leadership. Strong leadership is required. So, really good answer to the question that I had to repeat twice to get the answer. I'm going to get tougher as it goes on here, right? We only have a certain amount of time. All right. Jessica, do I need to repeat the question for you?
I'm going to need you to do it one more time. No, kidding. So I think by caring genuinely, right? Remembering that each and every one of us are human. We all have our quirks. We all have our differences. And just remembering that just because there are differences amongst each other, it doesn't automatically need to be a problem. And I think when you care genuinely for people and look at them as humans, you gain trust. And when people trust you, they're going to eventually and naturally be comfortable and want to open up.
Well said. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, it's just great to hear our employers even talking about the same issues that we do at Labor, which is to care for our membership and to care for one another. And often we don't spend enough time on the things that genuinely unite us. I remember there was a time, went and met a very large glazing contractor who said, you know, I don't sit with my labor partners as much as I sit with the guy who sells me caulk, right? And you guys make up almost 70% of my business, right? That is what unites us. Simple fact that our membership are your employees. And we don't spend enough time in between contract season. Everyone's busy, and we get that. But forums like this and settings like this, these are the ways to unite us, not divide us.
Yeah, well said. Jeff?
So I can answer that question a few different ways, but just to bolt on one of the things that Jim said is, excuse me, in his speech today, just show that you could hear the passion about the contractors working closer with the union. And that's something that I think needs to be continued on, and not just at negotiation time. To build on what you said, is we need to get to know all our business managers and all our district council, and appealing to them to build relationships. Because if you need an enemy, it's not each other, it's the non-union sector. Until we get that right and start pushing back, because we've never been in a time, as far as I'm concerned, where there's such a shortage of workers. How do we get that workers? And we can talk about diversity, inclusion, all those things as well, but I mean, we have to work together to come up with a game plan, get in the war room and come up, how do we make this work as partners, not separating ourselves. The second part of that one I take a look at is, I talked to a group of people, this was about 2 years ago, and it was mostly people, you know, my age group, and they were complaining, just like our fathers did, about we just didn't work as hard as them, and went on, and they were talking about, obviously, the millennials. You know, and I spoke up and I said, fortunately, I have 2 kids that are of that age group, and they challenge me all the time. If you allow yourself to be challenged, you get to grow. And I think, unfortunately, there's sometimes people from my generation are retired in place and want to keep doing things the same way all the time. But if you look at the facts, the millennials actually started in computers at a young age. And I'm not just talking about traditional education, but they're smarter and they're better educated. And if you can tap in what makes them tick, and a lot of times that work-life balance, we hate hearing that at our age, but it's true. And they can work more productive, but I think we need to make sure we do a better job of mentoring, not just pushing orders down.
Yeah, well said. I think that one element of what you've just talked about is one of those differences, and that is generational differences.
Yeah.
And so I think you addressed it beautifully. My good friend, Mr. Swanson.
Discovering our commonality, a few things come to mind. One would be, especially in work relationships, shed the barriers. And a big barrier is, oh, here comes Bob, he's president of the company, we're in trouble. All I am is Bob Swanson, trying to do the same thing every worker on that job site is trying to do. Be a win for Swanson Youngdale and a win for our customer. So I think the first thing that starts commonality is shed what could be a barrier. The second thing that comes to mind is no judgment. Again, it's easy to right away say, you know, I'm better than you, you better listen to me. That gets us nowhere in understanding our commonalities. Last, I would say, be vulnerable. That opens up the conversation. And it takes usually a first step by whoever I'm dealing with. So that whole issue of mental health, etc. It's amazing when I'm vulnerable and explain and open up to my journey, it opens up the doors to all sorts of things. So I would say those are 3 things that come to mind.
Could you share with us, it came out of our conversation in the podcast, you talked about your viewpoint on certain aspects of the workplace 20, 30, 40 years ago, comparing it to more recent times before you retired. Could you share some of your thoughts about how you looked at things, particularly as it relates to what I affectionately refer to, and that is the soft skills part, the people part, then and now?
Well, in the 60s and 70s, there were no soft skills. It was basically a lot of yelling and get the job done or you're fired. Intimidation was present all the time. Fear present all the time. So people weren't oftentimes performing because they wanted to. They were fearful they were going to lose their job. So over time, it became this is a team. And I can't be abusing part of my team partners. I have to work with them. And in a labor relationship, I was involved in labor relations.
Be nice, Bob.
No, it so often was us and them, but not only us and them, they're the enemy at both parties.
Yeah.
And thankfully, over the last 10, 15 years, we're getting by that. We still have kernels of that around, but we're in the same industry, and we have the same goal. And here's the thing, it isn't zero sum, it's win-win. So, you know, if we're doing well as an industry, getting more work hours, guess what? As a contractor, I'm more successful, and my employees are more successful, and your members are more successful. But here's the key that we forgot. Recruitment. If our industry looks like it's dying, who's going to join us? Nobody. So we have a recruitment issue, and we have to start realizing if we show a better face about this whole thing, we're going to be more attractive to that young generation, that we are a good alternative for them. Did I get where you wanted to go, Dennis?
Oh, yes, you did. Jessica, give us the millennials' perspective on
I don't know if I can do that right now. That was a fantastic answer. And,
yes, you can.
A millennial's perspective on all of this. So obviously I was not around back in the day when, and I mean that in the nicest way possible, when it was yelling and intimidation, so I can't speak on that, but I can speak on how beneficial it is to be able to have mentors in the workplace and be able to feel comfortable. Hey, raise your hand, I don't get it, can you explain it a different way? And to have that respected and to have your voice and your opinions heard. That's very important.
What motivates millennials?
Pardon?
What motivates millennials?
What motivates? I think a work-life balance does, but I also think a lot of that is trust, right? It's earned. You need to prove that you can be trusted by your employer in order to have a flex schedule, right? I think that's something that's earned, not necessarily just given. Does that make sense?
It does.
All right.
It does. Let me toss out another question. What role does fear play in our business? Chris?
I speaking of what Bob was saying, I recall in my younger days, I was always around construction sites, and I felt in that's 70s, 80s, fear was a big part of the construction environment. It was typically a superintendent who was yelling, screaming, and in your face, and that's how the game was done. So I think we've developed over the years where as it's become honestly more sophisticated, we see a lot less of that yelling and screaming, and it's more about, documentation and skills and recognition of those skills, and those schedules get better and teams perform at a higher level. So, there's definitely fear is a factor that's out there, but nothing the way it was 50 years ago. It's just it's a different game that I think we play now. So
Yeah.
Still there. Fear, from a contractor's perspective, we're terrified not to make a schedule because contractually we get it handed to us if we miss schedules. So that's certainly a driving factor. It drives me, but it's not the same physical threat that maybe it was in the day.
Mm-hmm. Paul?
With responsibility to complete a task or a function, fear will always be present. I was fearful of coming up here today. So I think it's a function and intertwined with really what we have to do in life responsibly, either as a family member or working with a team. I think where we diverge from that is like what Chris just said, and Bob had mentioned early. We don't necessarily need to use fear and intimidation as a tool. It's not received well anymore. I think in our upbringings, in our exposure to work from the time of our work inception, we just felt that it was hand in hand with it. Mm-hmm. So I think we're always going to live with a degree of fear of failure. But again, we don't necessarily need that from our supervisors and business owners. I think there's enough of it, there's enough stress in the world that everyone has to succumb to in this room. It's dynamic times right now. So I think we're all walking around with a higher baseline stress level. So that is a tool, using fear and management tactic, I have found it to be counterproductive.
Good. Jim?
Yeah, talk about fear on the job site, but as a labor leader, our membership, and Paul, you touched on it, the fear that our members have, and, being a labor leader is trying to convey the fear. It's surviving in this economy. It's the rapid pace of information and news with their phones, with, just everyday living, that our members carry that to work. And it's great to hear our contractors talk about being more inclusive, because in general, we're all living in fear. We're living in fear, living paycheck to paycheck. And in our industry, sadly, we haven't kept up with rising inflation. The cost of labor just continues to go up, and have we kept up? And a lot of times, the fear that our members have on being able to even make 2,000 hours a year in this industry, it drives their fear to work, and they can't go to work in an environment that's also fearful. And I think that's why we see the rise in mental health issues and substance abuse issues. I think because our industry was so male-dominated, and it had such a, you're the breadwinner and you have to make that living to feed, to provide for your family. Well, nowadays, everybody's wife works too, or husband, and we have two-job families that, you don't even have enough time to spend with your kids, and you're spending more time in the workplace than you are with your family. And when you're struggling in this economy, then the fear and the anxiety just continues to rise.
Yeah. Jeff?
Well, I think everybody's saying the same thing, is fear doesn't have a place in the workplace anymore. It just doesn't. I mean, the rules of the game has changed. You're not fearful for your job because you can walk across the street and get another one. We've talked before we come up on stage, it's a common problem is the shortage of workers. So you have to kind of reinvent yourself as an organization. And how do you attract people? You don't attract people by fear. And I guess the other thing I look at is, fear. If you have fear of taking risks, you're not going to be successful. I mean, I say to my kids, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. And I say the same thing as in the workplace. Now, if you make the same damn mistake 3 times, you're not learning either, and we should probably look at you getting a different employment. But short of that, though, it's like you have to be confident in yourself. And you talk about the mental health issues. I think that's so prevalent in our society, and I think we're moving away from that macho image where, it's not cool to talk about your feelings. And, that's so important to understand the people that work for you, so you can find how do they learn, what are their triggers. I think that's extremely important, to understand the triggers.
Yeah. Some of you have heard me talk about the notion of developing the whole person, that the unions in general, the construction trades certainly have done a good to a very good job of developing the basic hard skills. The apprenticeship programs continue to improve and have more and more benefit for the signatory contractors. But what we're not doing enough of is developing the whole person. And so the question is this: how important is it for us as contractors and labor leaders to recognize that how we develop people needs to change, and it hasn't changed enough yet? Paul, you had some thoughts on that even before today's session.
Yeah, we're different. We're dealing with different wiring in people. I'm just speaking generalizationally of myself. The wiring on the circuit has changed tremendously. And I think, Dennis, you touched on this in a number of your writings, is that, things such as emotional intelligence, which I think we were naive and ignorant about how important a skill that is, whether it be for a working team member, even at a foreman's level. Mm-hmm. It was probably a skill set that should have been emphasized and reinforced back in the days when I was working the tools. Having an understanding of those types of skills now, I think, is very relevant. And I think, just with progression in our culture and in our society, a number of the soft skills that you point to are going to make entities more productive and profitable. And I think it's either you get on the bus or get left behind at this point. That's the trend, that's trends, and those are the areas of propelling people to do better in their personal lives, as well as more successful in their careers.
Yeah, well said. Jessica, your thoughts?
So I think, again, if you can build a company and a training platform that is going to have an open-ended conversation and acknowledging people's differences and qualities and how they learn differently is definitely going to help that, right? So I may learn one way, he may learn another way, but if I have somebody that can adapt and train in the ways that are going to benefit me, the whole entire company and the whole entire organization is going to thrive. And that's going to create that trust, and it's going to allow people to be open and grow personally.
Yeah. Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts, we have to have more empathy. And as a union leader, and I say it all the time, our business agents, they got to represent the membership from day one till they retire. And when you do that, you have to have empathy, because people do struggle. What you were as a 25-year-old is not what you are when you're a 45-year-old or getting ready to retire. And we have to teach and create a culture of empathy within the union, so that our business agents have the proper skills to help people through personal crisis, struggles at work, struggles at home. That's what a union is supposed to be, which is the entity that supports and represents our membership from day one to the day they retire. And so within that, you're going to have all the different ups and downs of somebody's work life that you have to deal with. And you have to show care, and you have to show empathy.
If I were to ask you, as I'm about to ask you the question, if you could pick one teachable skill outside of hard skills, one teachable skill to teach an apprentice, a journey person, even foreman and up, what would that skill be? Jim, you want to go first?
I mean, I hate to repeat myself and say empathy, but that is a learned skill, and you have to have the ability to really connect to other people. And a union is all about people. I mean, I tell my staff this all the time. We don't make money. We don't build things, right? We are a people organization. And within that, we have to teach our people to be more open-minded, to be more caring, and to look out for one another, or else what are we doing? What are we really doing?
Yeah. Jeff?
Well, to me, it comes down to lead rather than manage. I think the biggest thing that's changed is that, I truly believe that the generation that we're dealing with is that wants to learn, they want a voice. And so just because we did a tank lining this way, for an example, maybe a guy came from a different company, he's got a more innovative way of doing it. But if we close the door and say, no, this is how we've always done it, that's one of my pet peeves. And one of our guys says, well, why do you do it that way? Well, we've always done it that way. Well, there's a saying, it used to be when we grew up, if the bicycle wasn't broken,
Don't fix it.
don't fix it. Now if it's not broken, break it and rebuild it. And so to me, it's that communication piece of the guys understanding their crew, what motivates them, how do they learn, what you touched on, because we all learn differently. And so we have to really tap into that. So I think it comes down to that, the emotional intelligence is just understanding the people you work with and being okay that they challenge you. And I think, again, that's something that we have a hard time with sometimes, is that I don't need to be right. I don't run my business as a democracy, but I certainly encourage people to speak up and say, I don't think we should do it this way. My question after that is that, okay, what's your potential solutions? Let's talk about that. Don't just come in and say, hey, this doesn't work unless you got a solution.
Yeah. Bob?
First off, your question about apprentice, I would say listening. Too often, and myself included, it's easy, you think you're listening, but you're just already thinking about how am I going to respond. And then part of listening is confirming, this is what I heard, is that correct? And getting that dialogue going back and forth. And it gets you faster to that equal plane. Versus if I'm ready to jump, already I'm here and you're here. I'm not listening. I'm hearing, but not listening.
Yeah.
As far as how we can keep going with this, working better together, I think we have to understand we're all whole people. So Bob Swanson's Bob Swanson. Jim Williams is Jim Williams. We just happen to have roles we play and titles we have. So again, let's get rid of that baggage. We're whole, and here's the other piece. We tend as employers, and I would think labor leaders, we just see each other, who we see at work. But that person goes home to another world. And I think part of this whole thing is being vulnerable to bring also your home life to work so we can understand where you're coming from. And back to Jim's point, as we navigate through life, different things motivate us. So it's easy to say, well, geez, this person always gets motivated by a bonus or pay increase or always a title or whatever. That may work at this point in their life, but not 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So, and generalizing, well, all our project managers, we give a guy a car and this is, well, maybe a different project manager, totally different. That doesn't mean anything. So the old story, whatever rewards one person may not reward somebody else. So I threw a lot at you, but those are thoughts that came to mind.
Yeah. Chris, you're chomping at the bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we heard a lot of good things. You put them all together, and it came back to what we were talking about, commonality, finding those, sharing those, those family events with your peers. Listening, that's fantastic because that allows people to learn. When you listen, you learn. And as the world changes, and in particular with technology, it's about continuous improvement. And if you're not listening, you're not going to improve. And you need to engage with your team and with the people you work with to new processes, hear what they have to say, and then evaluate and make good decisions. And that's what allows things to move forward and will allow us, as union contractors, to be more competitive and to ward off, the competition.
Yeah. Paul?
Just to touch on a subset of the emotional intelligence and its importance, I would say two components of that I think really we all need to improve upon, particularly possibly the younger fellows, is self-discipline and structure in your life. I think, self-discipline is something we all struggle with. And I think that's a component that in increasing your ability to have that is going to just make your life better. It's going to be more rewarding. And structure, just to go back again, we're all walking around, multitasking far more than even 10 years ago. So I think in terms of new workforce as well as ourselves, like we all struggle, we all read productivity books, like how do we handle the deluge of emails and text messages and everything. I think assisting in that is going to probably lower stress levels. So we're not all as edgy in the workplace or at home, which should help diminish maybe some of the mental issues that, people are confronted with.
Yeah. I've often said that who we are as people today is a result of everything we've experienced, everything we've learned, everything we've done, and everything we've said. And that's who we are today. And the real question that follows that is, does that all produce a person who can become a leader and be trusted as a leader? So let's talk about trust. Jessica, the quality of trust. How important is it? What does it mean? And is there enough of it going around?
So trust is very important in any relationship, right? Friendship, family, a co-working relationship. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything. If you don't have trust, you're not going to have that good foundation. If you don't have trust and you don't have a good foundation, the communication is going to go out the window. And then I feel like that is when the issues happen, right? Because you're not open to the other facets of everybody as a human, right? You're closed off and you don't want to hear it, and you maybe aren't inclined to have those difficult conversations if you don't trust people. So I could go on and on about that, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. If any of you were to flip open the books that some of you have in front of you, you'd find that the number one quality that I learned about from my research and survey was trustworthy, being worthy of trust. It's a quality that is hard to achieve, as we all know from our experience, very difficult to restore when broken. Jim, thoughts?
Sure, on trust, the more you work together on things, the more you develop trust too. And being able to work with our management partners through our trust funds, through meetings like this, you just naturally, if you're open and you like to listen and you're open to listen, you develop that strong trust and that bond to be able to tackle some really hard issues and to move an industry forward. That's not easy, and you have to trust your partners. And the more you work together, the more you can build that trust.
Proof's in the pudding.
And you do it outside of not just in a meeting. You know, you get to know someone on the personal level. You go out to dinner. You spend time, have coffee, get to know each other. That's how you can develop more of a trustworthy relationship too.
You mentioned the word relationship, something which is built over time. It inspired the title of my book, where my concept is that soft skills, the qualities of people, are what enable you to be able to build and maintain good relationships for a long time, just like the steel keeps the building up. And it can only happen over time. So you have one bad negotiation, after all of them have been very, very good. One horrible negotiation could sour the relationship at a local level in a CBA negotiation for years. And those years cost both parties time and money. So again, if we think about this emphasis on what we're trying to share conversation about, relative to people and their qualities and how we learn about each other, how we build relationships. If there's anyone sitting in the audience that doesn't understand the incredibly important value of relationships and what they really mean and how difficult they are to maintain over time, you have some work to do. It's not just good enough to do the job. It's not just good enough to set the window or to finish the drywall. It's not good enough just to do that. This is me, and I'm not a tradesperson, I come from the management side, but that's the easy part in relative terms. And in part because we do a good job of teaching that part, both in apprenticeship training as well as in the field, in the shop, and the contractors. But it's the other part, again, that whole person piece that I think is so very, very vital. Bob, what are your thoughts before I go on to my next prepared question?
Trust is earned, and it's critical, but it's earned. You can't demand it. Walk the walk. Don't just say the talk, but walk the walk. Follow through when it's tough. And then last, I'd say admit to your partner, whoever you have a relationship with, admit you screwed up. Admit a mistake. Ask for forgiveness. Versus, I'm always right, or I'm always going to put up the image, I'm always right. Boy, does that build trust also. I made a mistake. What can we do to fix things?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. One piece of research says that the smartest people from an IQ standpoint are not always the most successful people. This notion that if I'm the leader, I'm the smartest, I'm therefore the smartest person in this room, does not win the day. What wins the day are those average people who have higher levels of emotional intelligence, who understand themselves and have an interest in trying to understand other people so that they can take Bob's incredible wisdom, apply it to benefit the relationship. And that's what it's all about.
I just want to build on what Bob said. I think
Please.
Apologizing as a leader, the strength and ability to apologize, because now you give permission to everybody to apologize when they make mistakes. Because a lot of times people, you talk about that fear again, they're scared to make a mistake. Oh my God, what if the boss finds out? But if you have that reputation that you're fine, just admit it. Mm-hmm. And that also builds trust, and trust takes time. But a big part of that is when you screw up, you say, hey, that's on me.
We've all heard it thousands of times. If you're a leader, everybody's watching you all the time.
Yeah,
what you do and what you say. And that's how they arrive at their conclusion about you. And again, if the conclusion is, I don't trust him as far as I can throw him, that individual, to use a construction term, is totally screwed. All right, here's a prepared question. And it kind of builds on it a lot we've been talking about. Why does the seeming reality that each human being is different from every other human being divide us, impair us in relationships, and act as a source of unhappiness? Chris, you're up.
Yeah, I think, this is something I learned a long time ago about differences. And I'm going to go back to a story. When I was in high school and I'm playing high school football, I remember a coach coming into us and telling us, he looked in the room, he had everybody line up, and he goes, some of you are small, some of you are tall, some of you are big, some of you are little, some of you are fast, some of you, are slow, some can. And in all those differences, he said, we're going to take all those differences in this room and we're going to put it together and put it into a stew and we're going to create a team. And with that team, we're going to take your unique attributes. In this instance, again, maybe you're stronger, you're going to play line, you're going to block. You're fast, you're going to run with the ball. You got a good arm, you're going to throw the ball. You can catch the ball. You want to hit people, we're going to put you at backer and you're going to hit people. And I think when you combine all of those differences and all those unique attributes and acknowledge them, whatever they may be, that was a sports analogy, but it works the same in our personalities, you get a great team. And team is the key to all of this. And that's, I guess, kind of answer that.
Yeah, well said. Jessica.
So I think acknowledging differences, generally speaking, can sometimes make people uncomfortable. And I feel like when people are uncomfortable, they would rather, say, bury their heads in the sand instead of having those difficult conversations, right? We as humans, I don't think, are comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I think that it makes it difficult when you don't want to have those conversations. But I do think something that helps with that is, just acknowledging that we do, as people, need human connection. I think if you just keep that in the back of your head, it can kind of get you over that, I don't want to be uncomfortable, this is awkward situation, Yeah,
well said. Paul?
I remember reading a number of years back of a study that was conducted of 3-year-old children, and they just were flashing photographs of different kids and people, and they wanted to click the ones they liked. And overwhelmingly, the results were the kids liked the people that looked most like themselves. So I think innately in our DNA is that we're drawn to people like ourselves because I think it's like a comfort level. I think we're all worried about offending someone, and because people are different, we're not exactly sure what maybe the trigger points may be on that. So I think a little bit of the fear or unhappiness is created is because we have those differences, not good or bad, but until we get exposure time to one another, not going to realize the commonalities we have. So I think that is the source, because I think it's innately part of everyone's DNA to be drawn to people like themselves. But that shouldn't preclude the fact that we'll find what we have more in commonality by having more exposure and working together or socializing together. And that's been my experience. I grew up in Philadelphia, and at an early age, 3 of my 5 best friends were black. The other kid was an Armenian kid. So, to me, the diversity from just my upbringing was like, it's kind of hard because of how I was raised. It's just different than some other people may be.
Yeah. Jim?
And I think to continue the point that Paul talked about, as a labor leader, we're seeing the world in a different light after this pandemic, and people do want to come together more now because we had so much time away from each other, both in the workplace and in our communities, that like the moment's now for us, and And as a labor leader, we see it and have seen it for generations, that things like race and gender have been used to divide work and people from one another. So we are constantly looking at what are the things that unite us. And in our world, it's our trade, it's the skills that we have, regardless of what we look like, where we come from. And we have a unique opportunity right now, I think, to organize people into our industry around a shared set of values that have nothing to do with the things that used to divide us. And if we don't get it right now, we're gonna be upset with the results.
Yeah. There definitely is a window that's open right now that needs to be seized. Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's been said, like-minded people are attracted to like-minded people, and you get this comfort zone, and a little bit of complacency comes into play. And along comes someone that says, hey, we should do it this way. Well, I think the first thing you do is you put your guard up. It's like, oh, geez, that's not how we do things around here. But I think today, more than anything, we have to bring those guards down. And again, we have to lead that. We have to change our culture. We have to invite change. Because again, if you don't invite change, you're going to get left behind. It's that simple. As far as the unhappiness component, also that was touched on, is that I think sometimes we don't know how to react to those situations, so it makes us kind of unhappy. And rather than trying to deal with that, we kind of, suppress it.
Yeah. Bob?
I think a follow-up to that, I think as we look at our differences and then we see problems, it's easy, rather than looking inward, to look outward. It's because of them that we have this problem. And the use of the word them is always difficult, because who is that? And it's impersonal. But once you say, well, it's because of you, and you and I have to talk, so let's clear the air, versus it's those contractors, it's those union guys, So I think we're always in danger as we get fearful about where we might lose something. An easy out, rather than looking inward, is to look outward and then blame somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I imagine as you're sitting in the audience listening, and the term I'll use to describe it is actively listening to an incredible conversation, that if you know some or all of these individuals in the context of your work relationship or otherwise, you're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, that's Jeff, that's Jim, that's Jessica. I'd be surprised, maybe even shocked, if there are people in the audience say, that's a bunch of crap. They're just up there talking because they got the camera on them. The true test of a leader is that a leader speaks from their heart. And you can always tell it. You can see it. These are 6 very different people in terms of their communication style. Paul is a very contemplative individual. He very carefully chooses his words, but they're gold. And so I just want you to notice what's going on here, and why it's important, and why Jim said this was a good idea to do this at FIF. Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. And if he said, no, I don't think so, I'd be back in Savannah in warmer weather, but nonetheless. All right. Really good thoughts. Our next prepared question. Why are inclusion and social justice urgently needed to improve attracting, developing, and retaining the workforce of the future? Bob, let's start with you.
Well, if one member in our society is hurting, we're all hurting. So that's where I kind of always start. And if we look at all members in our industry and society, our family, and you could even go globally, to me, social justice is critical. And then if you look at social justice, it's not a I win, you lose. How about if we all win? So if we all have equal rights, if we all have equal opportunity, if we all have equal aspirations, what's wrong with that? No, we all win. So I think, again, back to maybe a little bit of that fear thing. Well, if he or she gets something, I'm going to lose. That kind of negates getting anywhere with social justice. And inclusion, back to understanding each other. We get away from that us and them, and we're starting to understand each other. So I don't care what issue it is, but I think as you get past the us and them, and you look at other people. So I'm just going to use an example. I must admit, as a boomer, when I started interviewing painters about 15 years ago, and they'd come in with tattoos from the wrist up, my first impression was, what the heck are we even talking about? But I soon realized, get past what I see, hire that individual. My goodness, are they talented? How could I even think otherwise? So it's that, what do they look like? And then I'll add one little thing I use in my presentations. What we see isn't what's really going on.
Right.
So we got to get past that, I see what I want to see versus what am I seeing here in that person. So I'd integrate all that together. And it's critical for understanding each other. And I loved your example about team. Together, everybody achieves more as long as we realize it's a team. So those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah.
Good.
Jim?
Yeah, I mean, this topic is obviously one that, as a labor leader, I mean, it's like near and dear to the values that drive our organization. And, you know, I always say our membership is reflective of society. You know, we have members that politically may vote one way and another way, and, you know, we're divided so much as a society around social issues right now. And I'm always under pressure from like a group of our membership that says, wait, you shouldn't talk about these issues. For example, I think it was in 2020 when George Floyd died. And, you know, it definitely touched a nerve amongst the African American community. And we did a lot of work as a union to try to lift up our members' voices in that, because they were triggered seeing a man get murdered at the hands of the police on TV. It definitely didn't affect our white membership the same way. Mm-hmm. And their reaction to things was way different. And again, if we're going to be an inclusive union, we have to speak up on behalf of issues that affect all of our membership. Our women members were very triggered when the Supreme Court ruled and overturned Roe versus Wade. And as a union, we could be quiet and not say anything around social justice issues, but then how does that woman who cares deeply about that issue, how is she being affected, and how does she feel her union feels towards her? So if we are going to become an inclusive organization, we have to take risks sometimes and speak out on issues that around social justice and around where we are as a society that sometimes are unpopular and may not touch the membership the same way, but it's critically linked, or else we won't become an inclusive organization.
Yeah. Jeff?
Well, I think Jim touched on a lot of good points there, and you know, the social justice component is, the onus is on us to understand that and how that impacts our employees, or in Jim's case, his members, because that's critical. Because again, times have changed. What used to work doesn't work. I'll keep going back to is that we're trying to bring people in this industry until we understand all those points and appeal to them, because now we actually have to appeal to them, come work for us, not there's a lineup outside our door. Things have changed. We got to change things different. And I think part of inclusion to me is also including them in decisions. Again, you don't have to run your company like it's a democracy, all in favor, but you do need to actually ask, you know, what do you think is the best way of doing things? That to me is a big part of that inclusion piece as well.
Yeah. Jessica?
So I think recruitment in this industry as a whole is very difficult right now. And I think that if we can, you know, have an inclusive environment that's going to allow potential recruits and current employees to realize that they have a great company that they're working for, right? They're going to want to stay at a company that makes them feel like their voice and their opinions matter. And that is going to help the whole picture, because it's going to better help us serve our customers and the industry as a whole.
Paul?
Yeah, Dennis, I kind of feel regardless of what anyone's individual thoughts are about social justice, it's a cornerstone of what our society needs to confront now. I mean, it's been inherited. It's a cause of past leaderships or lack of leaderships, either on a political level or in just community levels. We own it. It's not going to go away. So, either you go hide under a rock or it's addressed. And I think Jim and the recruitment staff at the IU level and with the councils I work are going out of their way to try to mitigate the disparities of tradespeople coming in.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah. So speaking from our business perspective, we've seen this issue and labor being tight and the market being what it is. We have really found that cultural outreach has helped us a lot. And in our operation now, we have in our main office, there's probably people from 10 different countries. On any given moment, you can hear someone speaking Chinese, Vietnamese, Russian, Spanish, Tagalog, I think I got that right, Philippine. And those people may have come from all different parts of the world. In particular, the Spanish group in our operation, we have people from Mexico, from Honduras, from Nicaragua, from El Salvador. Actually, we've got a guy from India in there too. So I see this big melting pot in our operation, and I believe that these different cultures have enhanced our business and made us better.
Yeah. Our speaker that gave us the doom and gloom economic forecast at dinner last night was talking about his 2-year-old daughter, I believe, who is in an immersion program. She is, at 2 years old, she is learning Spanish and Chinese. And they feel very strongly that that's going to be an important aspect of raising her and rounding her out to be a person that can enjoy the broadest range of experiences in her life. That was pretty impressive.
I feel from California perspective that maybe we were a little bit ahead of the country with that, because I took Spanish when I was in elementary school a long time ago. So it's kind of been part of the culture there. So I feel we've had, at least, from my experience, a little bit more emergence into other cultures. And we have, like I said, we got a melting pot of all these people from all over the world in our operation. And it's exciting to see. And it's people these people want to be there too. They're fired up about having these opportunities and having these great jobs and this potential to have a great career. And that's exciting for me to see.
Yeah. Each of you is a leader in your current roles. Bob, you continue to be a leader that has great effect on our industry, and will do so until you take your last breath. I'm sure of it, and it's important and needed. So as you think about leadership, if you could reflect on someone in your life that you thought was a great leader, and tell us why. Tell us about what made that individual a great leader. And this could come from any part of your life. I think this will be very instructive for us. Chris?
Okay, so what I'm thinking of my dad, right? I was very blessed and very fortunate to have a great leader and role model. And my dad, he was tough as steel. He was a tough guy. He was a glazer. This was a tough man, but he had empathy. And he raised us with empathy, and so that was something that I learned a lot from, seeing both sides of that, and I'm very fortunate.
Paul?
Well, Chris just stole all my thunder. I also had a Greek
His father was
father.
your greatest leader?
It's the Greek thing.
So I'll just parallel Chris in an incredibly tough human being that I'll never be able to reach that benchmark of his. And again, we're talking about a day and age when like everyone on this panel of like my era, came up hard. It was hard on the job site. It was a lot of screaming and elsewhere. So, because Chris stole my father, I'll say I had a wrestling coach that I was fortunate to come across. And just to give you the background, from the time I was 13 years old, I was working on bridges in the summer, mixing lead-based paint, shoveling grit, and I was getting screamed at. I think my foreman was under orders to just beat me down even harder by my father. And it was just the yelling all day, and you're no good, you're stupid Americano. I heard it all. You know, by the time I was around 15, 16, I came across a Lithuanian wrestling coach. And every session he had, all he was doing was, he was your personal cheerleader. He was, you're doing good, work a little better at that. He would call me at home after a good match, say, I just want you to know, and he'd get on the phone with my parents and say, you know, Paul really did a good job. Like, at the time I didn't realize it, he was basically instilling positive reinforcement. And that positive reinforcement, I mean, I went out of my way to impress him. Just getting that, because it was such a difference from the existing experiences I had work-wise. Years later in a psychology class, I realized positive reinforcement and what he was using. So I've tried to apply that lesson learned from him. I try to apply that in all my relationships, whether work or personally related.
Good, thank you. Jessica.
So I would say the two founders of my company, one of which is my father and the other is my uncle. Now, they have always treated every single employee so respectful, right? They treat them as peers. They've always given everybody the same opportunities to grow, to flourish, to have their ideas and opinions heard. And I would say one thing that I've learned from them, and this also translates into my personal life, is, you know, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that really, really goes a long way, and I think that ties into caring genuinely for people. You can have difficult conversations, you can give criticism, but you can do it in a way that shows that you care.
Couldn't have been said any better than that.
Oh, thank you.
Perfect. Jim.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking I've been so so blessed to be around so many amazing leaders, including the people that I'm sitting with up here right now. But I'm struck by an event that happened fairly recently around December. I was fortunate enough to be invited to the White House to meet the President of the United States. He was meeting with a bunch of labor leaders, and I was in a room of just 12 people that had the opportunity to meet the President, and I was in there with my father and the President of the building trade, Sean McGarvey, and I thought to myself, I go, wow, 3 people from the same Glazers local in Philadelphia get the opportunity to meet the President of the United States. And the person I think of the most is actually in this room that I identify with when it comes to leadership, because he was my business agent when I started as an apprentice, and Paul knows him very well. He was, I think he had his last week of work January 1st. He just retired recently, but it's Joe Ashdale, who was the business manager at District Council 21, and previous to that, the business manager of my local, because Joe was the type of leader that if you picked up the phone and asked for help, Joe would drop everything he was doing to help his membership. And it never changed. It never wavered throughout his career. And he helped so many people's lives that as a labor leader, I always wanted to be the type of leader like Joe. So,
Thank you. Jeff?
Well, there's a few people come to mind, I guess, I'd have to say I looked at different leaders and try to emulate some of their styles and incorporate it into my own style. I guess the first one would be my father as well, because he taught me at a very young age, you're only as good as your word. He was a very ethical person. taught you a good work ethic. So I took that away. And then I would say the next one would be the founder of our company, Park Durocher, Merle Durocher. He started the company with a paintbrush in his hand at 17 years old, and he grew the company, and he never forgot where he came from. So he was that guy on a job site, would go up and crawl up a ladder and shake a guy's hand, didn't care if he had paint on it, whatever the case may be. And that's always stayed with me. So I make a point, I go to the smoke pit. I get more information in the smoke pit than I do in our office. Going to the job site, say, talking to the work boots on the ground. So I learned those things from those two people. And the third person that I find as a leader would be my mother. Like, she taught me to always forgive.
Right. Bob?
As everybody, quite a few people come to mind. One particularly would be the co-founder of Swanson Youngdale, Vern Swanson, my uncle. Humble leader. It wasn't about him. He didn't make it about him, even though he was a great leader. Trustworthy, firm but fair. There kind of was always a statement that by his style, you could leave his office and an hour later say, I think I got chewed out. I think he expects more of me. So that was that expectation. You never wanted to disappoint Vern. And then he empowered you. When I became president, he was a great mentor for me. He allowed me to make mistakes, and he had that quiet leadership style and I can remember, I can think of his words like, how is that project going? That meant he knew more than I knew. And it was time, you better get up to speed and do something about it. But he let me handle it. So all those qualities were really beneficial.
Good, thank you. All right, next question. If I were to ask someone to describe, using single words, in a few words, to describe you as a leader, what do you think they would say about you? So I'm asking you to reflect on yourself and put it into words. Chris, what would they say about you?
I see Mike Greenlee out there. He worked for me, so I'd be curious what he would say.
Do you want to provide the answer? Yeah. We can take audience input on this.
I'm afraid. No. I think I would like to believe that people would say that I lead by being an honorable person. I do the right thing and I honor my word. And I think that's something I pride myself on, and I try to live by the golden rule. I want to treat people the way I want to be treated, so I treat people with respect. And I think I would get that.
Good. Paul?
The phrase I can think of is, has my back.
Good.
I'm there.
Good. There's a lot in that few words. Jessica?
Well, I would like to think that my coworkers would view me as kind, approachable, honest, and motivating.
Are they in the room? Did they hear you say that?
There is some of them, maybe. I hope they agree.
Yeah, I'm sure they would. Jim? Uh-oh, I heard something.
Uh-oh, what was that?
There'll be no outbursts from the audience.
I might have the most number of employees in here, so.
True story. Yeah, you're in the hot seat here.
You're on the spot.
There's a couple of them you might not want to talk to, but I would hope it's fair. I think fairness is something that I believe in, and I would hope my staff feels like, that I treat them fair.
Mm-hmm. Good. Jeff?
Passion. I care.
You care. You're a caring person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think people recognize that, so.
Yeah. Bob?
Hopefully, in all the groups I've led, caring servant leader.
Wow. Beautiful. It may seem like either, I don't know, a silly question to ask individuals in front of an audience, but one of the things that successful leaders do is they understand themselves. They know who they are. Because if they don't, there's a place to trip and fall every day. Because you're being watched all the time. You're being listened to intensely, even if it's second or third hand. And if you trip and fall, you may never get up. So if you don't understand yourself and can recognize, why the people you lead view you the way they do, you're lacking some fundamental information. And this also goes, Paul, to, we talked about earlier, the whole notion of emotional intelligence, being self-aware. It's not being boastful to say that I would be described as caring or a servant leader. They're descriptive, they're helpful, and all you have to do to make sure that you don't become an imposter is live to it. And all of you do that. I think it's probably a fair statement to say that all of you do that. All right. Now I'm going to get really soft skills on you. How is love present in your life at work, at home, and in society? I'm going to start with Bob because he'll probably have the best answer to this question.
First off, you have to love yourself. You have to be okay with yourself. You may want to do better, but you have to love yourself. Love, we tend in our society, it's romantic, but I just finished a book about the Battle of Okinawa. Severe, horrible battle, World War II. Those warriors loved each other. They gave their lives for each other. That's total love. As far as my family, and it reflects what I didn't get when I was growing up. I never end a conversation, I hope, a text, a phone call, I love you. We all need to feel loved. That's part of what's going on in our society. Too many people don't feel loved. As far as a worker, I care deeply about you, and they understand that. As a grandparent and parent, when my grandkids hurt, when my kids hurt, I hurt. The deepest hurt is losing a child. So I hope I give people the impression that I really care about them, and it's a loving relationship, because it's part of me. It becomes part of me. And I have male friends, we end phone conversations, and I say, I love you. What's wrong with that? We need to be more loving culture.
Jeff?
How do you beat that?
You don't.
Sorry.
No, that's very well
Mic drop,
stated. And I think a big part of that, as you said, is recognizing why love is important. And I think that was, that word is such a broad term that initially it's like, well, what does that really mean? Well, it can mean lots of different things, but I think it's, in the workplace, it's act of kindness. It's the little things you do, the recognition. It's not just about earning a paycheck. It's people feeling like they belong. You respect their opinions. You respect them as individuals. You're there for them. And I think, and if you build that organization, your loyalty, and one of the things I'm proud of, we have people who have been in this over 30 years. And there's one main reason, because they feel that they're respected. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things we did, our workforce, I remember when I was younger, it's like you stopped at 7-Eleven, you got a hoagie before you went to work, and that was your lunch. So we used to have what they call the food wagon, or the slop wagon, as referred to. We'd come in there, and it was so friggin' unhealthy and expensive that we built a kitchen, we hired a chef, and so every day is that we give all our guys in the shop and our office as well a free bowl of soup, and we also subsidize other food they do. And in the morning is a free bowl of oatmeal, and at lunchtime a free bowl of soup. So they always are fed. I never realized how much that paid dividends to us and the culture we built. The other thing I didn't realize is how little our staff was now going out for lunches. They were actually, hanging around and intermingling with the tradespeople and other things. So to me, our connection to that now is we draw people because of those little things. We've got a gym. I pay our staff 3 hours a week to go work out in the gym. And it'll be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're having a bad day, go to the gym and just clear your head. So I think those are the little things. And then reaching out and saying, what else do we do? We do what they call it. Was the Survey Monkey or the Monkey Survey? I always get that asked backwards. But nevertheless, is that when we put it out there, is that what are some of the other things? Well, we give everybody their birthday off, with pay. And if it falls on a weekend, you get to pick a Monday or Friday. But if it's a Wednesday, it means you take Wednesday off and go enjoy yourself with your family. When we came back to the survey, it was the little things that we were doing that actually is a draw people there. So at home life, I would say it's a matter of honesty, integrity, apologizing to your kids. And I've been wrong lots with my kids. I don't have a problem going to say, hey, Dad screwed up. But I also expect them to, because they'll tell you, and even people at work, is that you can make mistakes, but don't lie to me.
Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, love's prevalent in just about everything we do as a labor union. You know, we do what we do on behalf of our members because of the genuine love that we have for them. And I'm not afraid to say that I want to see and openly talk about that's what motivates us, is that love for the working class, that love for working people. And that should be what drives us and motivates us. And if our institution and our union doesn't put love at the center of our values, then I go back to what are we really doing? You know, the labor movement in general was founded by you know, that commonality, that love for one another, that created a great movement that we have all inherited. And if we don't bring love back into the work we do when it comes to organizing new workers, working with our employers and managing our staff, then, you know, we're not going to see the results that we need. And in my home life, I mean, the love that a father has for his children is the same type of love that we should have for our membership.
Jessica?
So for me, love is it's a principle, it's a concept that sparks joy. So something personally for me that sparks joy is to foster relationships, build new relationships, and I do that in a way that make people feel like you matter. You're a real person, you're a human, I see you. So that's how I share love and joy amongst all the facets of my life.
Terrific. Paul?
Yeah, so love's like a hot button word for someone of my upbringing. To be completely honest, I'm not very good at expressing emotion. It's kind of the way I was raised. My wife has accepted it to a degree, and daughter. So I try to express, you know, I guess it's a subset of love, but the support factor. So I usually express myself in, you know, whether it's my home life, about being very focused on what's important going on in their life and what help they need. And I think that conveys that feeling of love. And in the work perspective, things that are important to the people I work with, I make certain that I know about that. And I'll just take notes and make calendar reminders to ask them again about how their wife's medical condition is doing. I'll propose, do you need time off? I'll pay you the day if you need it. I offer it up before they might be hesitant to ask. So I guess I convey a sense of love through just a support mechanism for the people I work with and my family.
Mm-hmm. Good. Chris?
Well, this time Paul stole my answer. So I would basically,
You want
yeah, we need to do a flip, right? So basically, I feel that you know, I show love by engaging with my team in a positive way, and I try to talk to as many people in our operation as I can on a daily basis, you know, schedule permitted, by engaging in a positive way. And I think that's how I show love in my operation and by participating in the industry. I love this industry. I love curtain walls, and I love what we do. And so I engage in this because of the love of the industry. And you know, at home, you know, that's the little acts of kindness, I think, to your family members, or you know, how you express love, right? So there's little things. I know my wife, I like to run, and she'll take shoes and she'll put them by the heater before I go run so that they're nice and warm when I go for a run. So those little things, I think, make a difference, and that's love.
That's so nice.
I'm lucky.
Yeah. My mentor, in his first book he published 20 years ago, shared this thought. He said, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. That takes it right down to the craft level. Ask that craftsperson, do you love being in the trades? Do you love doing what you do? And if the answer is yes, it's reflected in how they approach their work. It's reflected in the quality. It's reflected in their safe performance, and they contribute to a positive environment wherever they are. So if I were to offer a prescription to people to kind of check themselves, check yourself, ask yourself that question: do I love what I do? And that doesn't mean every day you wake up and say, oh my God, I just can't wait to get in the office. I got a pile of crap I got to get into, and I got to meet with this person. It doesn't mean that. It's really the mindset that you carry into how you approach what you are involved in. Every business on this stage, whether it's the union or the contractors, ultimately, whether we put stuff in place, do things, say things, we're all in the service business. We serve people. I opened up this session by talking about pivoting to people. Well, one important group of people are the people that give us a reason to exist. And the union has, the IEP has a challenge of having two sets of people that they have to serve, one being their members and the other being the signatory contractors. And they're working hard at it under new leadership to do it better. Is that fair, Jim?
Absolutely.
And I think it's something that we need to grab onto and hold ourselves accountable to that. Because again, it's all going to boil down to what we do differently to perpetuate our industry, which is not going to go away. That's the other thing. Whenever I teach classes, I look at people and say, you don't have to worry about, we can't find enough people to do the work. Don't worry about a job. Construction is never going to go away. We may do it differently. We may use, what is it called next door? Surface, desert, that machine down the hall. What's it called? Jim, somebody, the machine, the drywall machine.
We may use robotics or,
yeah, but
or different tools.
Somebody knows the name of that. What's that thing down the hall? What is it? Canvas. Say it.
Canvas?
Canvas. Sorry, I'm old. I just gonna, it's going to be fine. I'll take an extra pill. I'll be good. All right. The last prepare question. What is the single most important action you have taken as a leader to make your world a better place? Single action that you have taken as a leader to make your world a better place. And again, that could probably be denominated the union, your individual contractor, the industry as a whole, something personally or otherwise. An action that you've taken as a leader to try to make the world a better place. Maybe the hardest question I've asked. Chris?
I think it might be the easiest for me. I stopped drinking, and that made a world of difference in my life. And my ability to interact with people, to engage, and to be a better person.
Very good. Courageous answer. Paul?
Yeah, just to kind of hit the rewind button again is, I think when I realized the potential good in implementing positive reinforcement, it was quite a change, and we were still a transitional generational company, and the old guard was still there, at the stern, yelling. But I think it's my wiring. It works. It's more adept to our current generations coming into the workforce. So if I have to look back, I think it was a no-brainer. It's just the fact that that's how I'm going to choose. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't work. It's just, it's the way I am in general. I have found, though, unfortunately for, some of the people I work with, they view that as almost like, well, he really needs me. They're used to getting reprimanded or threatened to perform. So when we get some people come on the board, and I get the backstory that it's like, oh, yeah, he really needs me because he's asking me what do I think about the work that's going on, my opinion on things. But that's the way I go, and it's the only way I'll go.
Thanks, Paul. Jessica?
So something that I've done this past 2 years, year and a half, would be really to try to better my active listening skills. And in doing so, it has made me more self-aware, and being more self-aware allows me to eliminate some bias, majority of bias, and be open to other people's opinions and look at things in a very, flat playing field manner.
Good, thank you. Jim?
As a labor leader, I think we often think our actions are so important to the world because we're so passionate about what we do, but so it's hard to be like, oh, it's that one thing. But I would have to say it was impactful to what I hope for our membership into the future was creating the trust with my team, our leaders, and namely with my partner, Greg Smith, because I believe that having a shared set of views, values, and the way we view the world similar provides good leadership to our membership and to our leaders. So
Yeah.
I think it's that trust thing.
Yeah. Jeff?
For me, it was recognizing and accepting my weaknesses. And once I realized that, then I start backfilling with where my weakness lied and being okay not having all the right answers because, that's hard on the ego. So for me, I think that was the biggest thing I did for myself. And then obviously it has the trickle-down effect from there, and which led to me, being transparent and candid in the responses.
Good. And Bob?
Similar, Jeff. I think somewhere along the line I realized that I didn't have the responsibility to have all the answers. And what that allowed me to do, it freed me up, one, and number two, to listen to others. What do you think? And then assess what's the right answer.
Chris, Paul, Jessica, Jim, Jeff, Bob, I thank you for an incredible conversation. If you agree with me, please offer them a round of applause.